coming up next.
Like, this is just my invitation to the ladies is I get it. I get the frustration. I understand the desire to make things better, to heal, to nurture, to tend. But the reality is you can only fix a certain problem with the right tool to fix it. And your job as a wife is not to be that tool in the same way that a husband's job in the marriage is not to be that girlfriend. He can't be. I've watched this really closely, and a common mistake men make is they go into fix-it mode when a wife wants to communicate a problem. And so I love to just watch people and study people, and I've watched women talk. And my theory is something like that women will oscillate between fix-it mode and feeling mode so fast that men can't even track and keep up with what's happening. And the nature of the conversation with women just changes so quick, but they all are on the same page. They all get it. They all nod. They all understand. And as a man, like I just imagine myself, if I was in that situation, I'd be like, what? No, I don't understand. Because I don't have a female brain. I can't speak the same language they do, right?
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You are here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction, your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter, a woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. Faith Over Addiction is about helping women come back to their identity in Christ, knowing that they are loved, cared about, and they are enough just as they are, so that they can create a safe, loving home space when they are dealing with family members who are struggling with addiction. Be that addiction from videos to pornography to substance abuse to whatever is pulling them away from their God-given identity. And Michael has joined us, and we are going to do some really deep searching on how to help your husband be the man he was designed to be, the man that God designed him to be. So we are going to touch on some touchy subjects around pornography. So if you've got kiddos listening, maybe this is the time to put in your headphones. But this will be powerful and valuable for you. So Michael, tell us a little bit about you, your background, how you have come into this work.
Tanya, first off, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to talk to you and all these lovely ladies listening. Give a short introduction. I was raised in a very abusive home. I ran from God. I tried to find worldly success. I actually have a PhD in chemistry. I worked in corporate research for a number of years, was very successful, got married. My wife and I now have 6 children. And along the way, God knocked me upside the head with a 2x4 and said, nope, that worldly path doesn't work. It turns out that I had a lot of problems along the way. And he just sent one wonderful man after another in my life to help me find a better way to love him, to love my wife, and love my children. And that's what I get to do now. And it's really quite a great blessing.
That is awesome. So, in looking at what you have done, you guys have run 3 businesses, you've done life coaching. What is God calling you into right now?
I think right now what God's calling me into is this void of male leadership for men. What does masculinity look like from a Christian standpoint in the year 2025? I mean, there's a lot of really negative concepts about masculinity, and I think a lot of people are afraid of masculinity. And as a result, most men don't even know what it means to lead as a man, to be a man. They don't have good role models. Show me one good actor in Hollywood that shows what it means to be an authentic Christian, God-loving, God-serving man. It's really hard. And so I think that's what God has asked me and many wonderful men to step into that gap and try to fill.
And when you bring up Hollywood, that's where I kind of go, oh, my guys watch the superhero. I have 17 and 19-year-old sons, and they watch the superhero movies and they want to be like this and they want to be tough. What is a God-centered masculinity? If we are walking with Jesus, what does that really look like?
That's a great question. Let me put some contrast. Femininity flourishes on praise, on you build up a woman by pouring into her verbally, physically, you build up with praise here. Masculinity, by contrast, flourishes on challenge. As men, we like kind words, don't misunderstand, but we need to be challenged. We need to pick up a sword and a shield and go in the cave and fight a dragon and get some gold. And the story of St. George and the Dragon is iconic. It goes through all of our literature, through all of our society, because it's the heart of what it is to be a man. That what you need most, you don't find sitting on the couch. You have to arm yourself, gird your loins, and go forth and actually combat something. And I think it's just a very, very different call that honestly a lot of men are afraid of.
Why? So why, if they're designed that way, why are they afraid of it?
I think there's 2 reasons. I think number one, society tells them it's wrong to want that. It's wrong to dream big. It's dangerous. You might hurt someone. Swords are sharp. I've cut myself before with knives many times, and that's dangerous. Let alone a sword. But deeper down, every man worries he's going to be a failure. So few men today have a good father that pours into them. And if you, as a man, if you don't have a good father, it's very hard to connect to God the Father. I once heard a really interesting analogy that what women see in a bridal relationship with Jesus, men have in a fatherhood relationship with God the Father. And there's something that a man needs to look at God the Father, to hear those words, "You are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased."
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't let myself hear that, if I block that grace, and if I become consumed with the world and the world's lies about my weakness or my badness, then I become just terrified of failure. And let's be honest, dragons are scary. And if I really think I'm going to fail, like, I don't want to become dragon lunch. Better to sit here on the couch. Somebody else can go fight the dragon. So yeah, that fear of failure is very powerful in men.
So let's talk about what the dragons are in this day and age. Very few men are, picking up a real sword, a real gun, going out to be soldiers. You could, but for years and years and years, that really was the job of actual physical protection. There
Absolutely.
still is part of that as physical protection, but what are those dragons that men are
I,
going out to conquer?
I think there's a couple different types of dragons. We always have to start with the internal dragons. The most terrible dragon always is what's inside of me. You see this in the Garden of Eden. We're led astray by our own disordered will. So the first dragon I have to counter is, what in my life am I not doing right? And let's be honest, if I'm a man and if I'm struggling with pornography, I'm struggling with alcohol, I'm struggling with, sports addiction, whatever it is, gambling, whatever, there's a dragon there to slay that's just as real and just as scary as the one St. George had to face. And so that's the first level. But then let's also step up to the next level, that we need to be real that the world right now has a plan for your family that is not what Christ wants for your family. And if you doubt this, spend 5 minutes on any of the social media platforms and see what they are bombarding your children with, and you will see there's a dragon there that needs to be slayed. But here's the problem. There's good and there's bad. And you, as the man, have to lead the family to slay the bad without also condemning the good. And this is really, really hard right now. It takes discernment, it takes prayer, it takes just a lot of time spent listening to and talking to your children. Right now, my oldest girls are teenagers, and we are literally going through the expansion of here's technology. And I'll sit down with them and we do Google searches together and understand, well, you want to learn about this? Oh, look, this search return just popped. Why is this search return dangerous? Understanding that, oh, this is a problem. And you have to be active there. You have to be engaged. You have to be the forefront of this. There's a good man I know whose 18-year-old son he just discovered his son was viewing inappropriate content online. And the
Mm.
relationship that he had built with his son empowered him to be able to have the son say, hey, look, it's not only on this piece of software, but this gaming platform that you didn't even know could view a web browser, there's a way to turn that into a web browser and go to. And the son volunteered that. He said, I want help and I trust you as a man. And for this man to have earned the respect and trust of his son, he had to slay both dragons inside, and he had to show he's willing to slay the dragons to the outside in a way that builds up the family. Is that helpful?
That is super helpful. So one of the things that we've talked about on this platform quite a bit is pornography. And we when my father would say when he was a kid, everything was behind the druggist, it was in a brown paper wrapper. It was a lot of work, to get anything beyond the Sears and Roebuck's catalog, right? And we know that men are super visual. What do men need to be slaying inside themselves? Let's tackle that one first. And then how do they pass that on, not only in how they treat their daughters, but how they build that bond you're talking about with their sons?
So I think we need to start by acknowledging that we live in a time that has targeted men in this way more than any other, and it comes up in funny ways. A couple of years ago, my wife just wanted to buy underwear, and her phone was out of battery, and so she logs into Amazon on my phone and purchases underwear. For the next 6 months, my Amazon was full of images I didn't want there. Like this was not even like you can bump this stuff through the most innocent of routes, but then you have to understand it. Like my wife will commonly say to me, I just don't understand why this sexual thing is so strong for you. And I say, of course you don't understand why. God made men and women very, very differently. And there's something intrinsic in the sexual view of the masculine that I don't know that women will ever fully understand. And vice versa. There's plenty of things about women that men won't fully understand. But something in here as a man is this drive is so strong. And it can feel sometimes like it overwhelms you. And I have had my own struggles with pornography throughout the years. Particularly before married, but it's not like marriage just causes all that to solve, go away. And I think what's so hard from the wife's perspective is to not see this as a rejection of her. Because the reality is, as a man, it's almost a visceral response. When my wife, innocently enough, ordered that underwear on Amazon, for months, I didn't want to open Amazon because I knew just seeing those images would trigger things in my brain that would send my brain spinning down these paths that it's hard to even describe. And so, as a man, the first dragon to slay is this dragon that says, maybe I actually can't handle looking at pictures of women in underwear on Amazon. Like maybe I can't do that. Maybe that's actually too big of a struggle for me. And the dragon is to the humility to say, actually, I don't. So the Walmart where I live, we have one Walmart, and there's the meats and there's sporting goods. Those are my two sections. Directly in between them is women's
Oh,
lingerie. Why is that there? I don't know. But how do I walk from meat to sporting goods? I walk back up and around. I probably had an extra 2 minutes to my journey to do the big long loop so I don't go through women's lingerie. Why? Because Michael is the sort of human that really doesn't do well if I walk through that section. Like, this has nothing to do with me rejecting my wife. This has to do with me understanding my own shortcomings, my own sinful nature, and saying some fights aren't there. And the first fight is to fight against the resistance of going down there. For Michael, I don't scroll Facebook. There's stuff images there I don't want in my brain. If I want to go to Marketplace, which I love Facebook Marketplace for deals, I just have a rule. I click that Marketplace button before I scroll. Okay.
mhm,
That's a
mhm.
rule that keeps me safe. And these dragons oftentimes are just the humility to say, this is a big enough deal. I need to deal with it. It's the same thing oftentimes with alcohol. A lot of men out there I know, they probably drink a little too much. They know they're not getting drunk. They're not getting angry. Like they're not hurting anybody. But it's like just a little bit too much. And it creeps and it creeps and it creeps. And the humility to say, ooh, maybe I do need some help with this.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the next step is the ability to get help. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, pornography, I think, and alcohol, and really all these addictions are the sort of thing you can't do on your own. You need to find, and ladies, I'm sorry, it has to be another man who's going to guide him there. So just a short moment. Like there's an asymmetry in marriage that I think we don't like to discuss as Christians, but it goes something like this: the man is called to be the rock, the foundation, and the feminine responds to that. I love the analogy of dancing. Right? You have to have the lead and a follow. My wife loves it when I raise and do the outer spin in our swing dance because she gets to
Yeah.
spin and she loves it. Right? But the problem is I have to be solid. And when we were first learning to dance, there was this move you do as a man. You raise your hand a certain way so you get to do a spin, which is kind of fun, right? But if you do it wrong and you leave your wife unsupported, well, she gets confused and she doesn't like that at all, right?
Yes.
And so as a man, I need to understand what spins can I do with a wife while I'm dancing and what spins are so chaotic and disorganized that I have to do them with another man. And these sort of issues, you need another man for. It could be a pastor at church, it could be a trusted friend at church. I'm blessed. A man named Jared at my church. He and I will have these conversations, and he will just be very quiet, listen to me, and say two words. I'm like, oh. And he'd be like, good, that was the right two words. And there's something there that other men can bring to men that women just cannot bring, and vice versa. Women need women just as much.
Oh, absolutely. And while I have two things while we're on this. What you are claiming in my mind, and check me on this, is an identity. I can look at you and say, Michael, I'm not a bank robber, and I'm never going to be a bank robber. That is part of my identity. And
Right.
I can also look at you and say, I'm not a murderer. So where I think we get tripped up is, can I do just a little of this and not have it affect my identity? And pretty much across the board, I've been working with addiction over 15 years, is no, you can't. You can't. Jesus is very clear that anger is murder. Lust is adultery. We have
Yes.
already crossed the line, because when we talk about this all the time, our brain in a movie can't tell the difference between whether it is really happening for us or whether it's happening on the screen. We think we can separate it, but that's not true. And especially raising young males, the last formed mind, until they hit 25, 26, can't tell the difference at
It really
all.
can't.
And that's when
It's
I look
it's
at, I have cut off all first person shooter games in my house. Now, I can't follow them around and make sure they're not doing it at their friend's house, but I've explained to them, this is the reason why, because if you see the story content that goes with that, it's not just the first person violence, it can be a lot of violence towards women. And I'm like, we've crossed a line here. Our brain is grabbing this. So that's my first thing, is grabbing that identity. Who is our identity? And then your other piece about, we labeled this, what can Christian women do to help their husbands find their identity in Christ? And when we look at that, wives are not saviors. We are not the ones that make them clean, neither are husbands to women. Why, Michael? Why do we shoo away going to our gender groups and saying, I need help, I don't understand, this is really hurting me? I mean, even women do it. Why do
oh
you
yeah,
think that is? Why do you think men won't reach out?
pride. It's just pride. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to think of myself as that guy. It's embarrassing to think of myself as that guy. And let's be honest, a lot of people will shame that guy. And I don't want to be shamed either. On that note, I think one of the things you just said I have to respond to, when a mother makes rules for her son, that's proper and ordered. But I always caution women, be very careful making rules for a husband, because that actually is not ordered and that does upset the order. And the call for for a wife to a husband is one of love. And maybe your husband's at the spot where he is having a beer too many. How can you love him through that? Because odds are he's already shaming himself pretty hard in his head.
Yes.
More shame is not going to help. And if I go back to what can you as a wife do to love a husband, just to love him. And you can share your feelings insofar as they are your feelings. But be
Yes.
very careful about what a lot of modern people call sharing feelings, which becomes accusation and blame. And those are two very, very different things. The I feel scared because I see what's happening with you and alcohol. I feel scared that you won't love me if you continue to look at images of girls online. Those are
Mhm.
feelings. But this, you're a terrible person if you do this, is not. But I have to respond to one of the things you said there just to really drive the point home. Modern neuroscience has done some amazing things. And there's this really cool study that came out where if I'm a man and I look at, I want to look at you right now. There's a piece of my brain that lights up with connection, person, conversation, dynamic relationships, all that stuff lights up. And if I pick up a hammer, I have a pen right here. Look at the pen. My part of my brain lights up that says tool. All right. Well, when I, as a man, look at a picture of a naked lady, the part of my brain that lights up is tool. And to understand just how critical this is as a man, because not only am I making whatever image this is of this particular girl into tool, but I'm training my brain to see female as tool. And if you don't pause and think about what effect that's going to have on your wife, on your daughters, on your sons, because those sons are watching you closely, and you better believe their brain can pick up, oh, dad's brain turned on tool looking at that real girl over there. That must be what I should do too, because it's super easy for them to do it. And these things matter. Like this, the neuroscience is so powerful, and it affects so many parts of our lives.
It is. And as we learn more about this, the one thing that I think we're talking about is this identity shift of personality is not permanent. If things are causing you damage that you are doing, we have a savior, which is not your spouse, not your children, not even your friend. We have a savior that can lift this, that can make these changes. And like you said, that 2-minute walk from sporting goods to meat, changes everything for you. You don't have the decision fatigue of I'm not looking, I'm not thinking, I'm not doing that. How do you started into it a little bit when a wife notices this, right? And we've got in the scripture that if you can show with your life more with your words, right? When a wife notices this and she does feel unsafe, she does feel like this is really harming both her and the family, what's her best option?
So let's always start off with a simple pray. Prayer is so powerful. But let's also go deeper in that and say, by all means, start with prayer. And I would say to her, I think it would be very appropriate to go to your husband and say, I'm scared about this. I want to love you. I want to support you. Like, I'm not going to parent you, but I'm just worried about this. I'd like to ask you to prayerfully consider yourself. Should you seek help for this? And then also, let me tell you a quick story here. So when I first got married, I had no idea how much of anger problem I had. And so here we are, and we're at church, and I've got this little 1-year-old who's being a typical 1-year-old snot brat of a turd of a kid. And she's doing all those things that 1-year-olds are supposed to do to make her parents super grumpy. And I'm sitting there in the car, I'm like, "Arr!" Like, I mean, I wasn't hurting her, but like inside I was a raging furnace, right? So I didn't know if this other man's watching me. Now, I was set up on this one, but set up very well. And so my wife, just happened to be friends with his wife, and they were just chatting about it, and this topic came up. And his wife said, my husband Ben used to be kind of like that. Would you like Ben to talk to Michael? And my wife said, sure, keep it gentle, but sure. And so the very next Sunday, Ben comes up to me after church. Kudos to Ben. This was so smooth. He walks to me, he introduced himself. I'd never met Ben before. And he says, hey, this seems a little bit out of left field, but I wanted to reach out because back when I was in a spot where I was really struggling, someone reached out to me. He hands me a flash drive and he says, you can keep this. You can throw this away after I walk away if you want. But on here, it's a bunch of talks and some books that really, really helped me. And then he hands me his business card and he says, if you ever want to do lunch is on me. We'll just talk. No judgment, nothing at all. We'll just talk. And he literally does this. He shakes my hand. He walks away. Super smooth. And I did that sort of thing, like as a prideful man. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that's all about. I can't imagine I have a problem I need to work with, right? And so I'm walking out there later on, and my wife said, oh, who is that? Totally playing it cool. And I'm like, oh, his name's Ben. He gave me this thing. She's like, oh, that's interesting. Doesn't like really poke or prod. She'd already set her cards in motion. And so sure enough, guess what the first talk on that flash drive was? It was one about anger. And, a couple of weeks later on, I happened to text Ben, hey, okay, fine, the offer for lunch is still open. And Ben and I became very good friends. And Ben changed my life with what he brought into my life. But it took very gentle setups there and also just the openness. I think my wife had been praying about this. And then when Ben's wife brought the subject up, my wife was aware enough to be gentle, just set a few things up and said, yes, we'll be open to that.
That shows the need for community. We're not Christians on an island, right?
Right.
The need for community. But it also shows that openness that your wife had been praying for without nagging you, without coming at you, and she didn't tip her hand, but she didn't really have anything to tip her hand on. She said yes to an offer from another person, right?
Right.
So if a man is aware enough that he wants help, how does he how does he begin to test the waters and go, are you a safe man to talk to? Are you a safe person? He was really smooth in doing it that way, but had you decided you wanted help, how would you test to see who's safe?
It's really hard. First off, it is very hard. There's this sort of phenomenon my wife and I describe in the Christian community, which is really yucky, which we call reverse virtue signaling, which we all stand around condemn. Oh, this is so bad. Yeah, anyone this that would be so bad. And it's so unhelpful because almost in every one of those meetings, someone in that circle probably is struggling with that, and they just feel like the worst at that moment. One on
Say
one.
what it is again.
Reverse virtue signaling is, imagine we're in a circle of people after church, and we're all like, oh, I heard so and so is struggling with pornography. Oh, that pornography, that's so terrible. Oh, yeah, that's just really, really yucky and really, really bad. All of which is true. But if there's somebody else in that circle who's struggling with pornography, like, do you think they're going to bring up this issue to anyone in that
No, you
circle?
just
Not
made
a
it
chance.
completely unsafe for them to do that.
Right. So, first thing is always be aware of that. And if you see that happening, find a different group to hang out with. And if you are the person doing that, I'd strongly encourage you that that's just a really toxic behavior. But that said, here you are, you're a man, you decide you want some help. I always recommend going one on one, approach a man, and being like something like this. Hey, Bob, we have talked a lot. I've got some struggles I'm going through right now. I'd really like someone who I could sit down and talk to and, maybe just get some perspective on. And Bob's going to do one of two things at this point in time. He might be like, well, I'm pretty busy. Great, move on. Bob's not the right guy for you. Or Bob might be like, all right, we could do lunch sometime. And you're hearing his tone of voice. If there's an openness, try it out, ease into it. The worst thing's going to happen is you say, well, Bob, here's the truth. I've been struggling with pornography lately. And Bob might be like, oh, get away from me, sinner. It's unlikely, though. Most of the time, if you're at that point with Bob, that's probably not going to happen. Um, but you got to be bold. You got to take a risk. You do have to take a little bit of risk, take an informed risk, but set yourself up for success somewhere where it's just you with one other man, probably a little bit older, one on one, that you've approached, asked for help, and he said he's willing to help. Now, there's something really interesting in male psychology. A lot of the great men talk about how there's this third phase of masculine life, which is specifically the desire to pour into other men. I think there's a parallel of the grandmotherly types who want to pour into their family. But for men, there's something funny that happens in us where we actually, this phase, we want to pour into other men, even that aren't related to us. And I think God put that there specifically because young men need men as mentors in a very powerful way. And so that there's this desire to do that. And if you are calm and prayerful and attentive, God will bring that person into your life. I believe that 100%.
So I would see that, this is my perspective, and it may be wrong. That's a huge dragon. I
Oh,
have to be
absolutely.
really bold to go up and say, I'm struggling with this. Even I've watched it is, even if they need to ask for help with a car or help with something like that, we're not talking about a mechanical thing. We're talking about ourselves. That's
Yep.
huge. How does that man prepare to even ask that?
I think the first thing I encourage this man to realize is that the man he's talking to has probably struggled with something similar. I mean, it's not like these things happen in a vacuum. I work with men all the time that have dealt with pornography, same-sex attraction, men that have had affairs, and pretty consistently they'll say that, oh, Michael, this is going on. I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. And they're so ready to accept judgment, but they don't realize, like, I've had my own struggles with sexual purity. Like, I'm not standing here as some Pharisee saying, like, I got this figured out. Like, I still struggle with it. I still have to walk around the store in Walmart and don't let my wife buy underwear on Amazon. That's still true. I still have that struggle, right?
Yeah.
Like, we all are in this together. And I would offer to men that other men sense that if you as a man approach this with humility, approach this with the I'm trying to do better, most Christian men will respond very well to that. Do it one on one, ask for the help before time. Like, make it clear that you're asking for the help. Like, this needs to be like, hey, let's talk about sports for an hour. No, no, no. I'm struggling with something in my life. I need another man. Can I go to lunch with you for an hour?
Yeah. Yeah. And so what is wife doing in the background? I mean,
Mm.
does she know this is happening? What's going on?
So here's a common scenario that I encounter a lot. The man and woman get married, they have a couple of kids, man's working, wife is up to her eyeballs dealing with babies and poop, and maybe have a dog, and she's like, "Mom, I have kids." And he comes home from work and and she's like, "Oh my goodness, help, adults, I get to talk to an adult. Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me." Totally typical, totally normal. And he's kind of like, adulted out, so much work, must love wife, oh poop. And then on top of that, he pops up and says, "And by the way, can I go have 2 hours to go talk to another man?" And her brain's like, "What? I've been with babies all day and you want 2 more hours to go?"
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the setting. And so my invitation to you as a wife in that scenario, two things. Number one, it is in your benefit for him to do it. Long term, letting a man be with other good Christian men that are working to become better pays out more to a wife than she can imagine.
Mm.
Every time. Now, if he's going out to drink and go watch a sports game, that's different. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where he says, "I'm going to talk to Bob and I just need another Christian man. We're going to talk real stuff." You don't even have
Mm-hmm.
to know what the real stuff is, but I want to talk real stuff with Bob. That pays out. And when my invitation to her is as painful as it is to say yes and take 2 more hours of dealing with babies. But my
Mm.
second point I want to make to her is to ask and be bold enough to ask for the same thing in reverse. I believe that every
Mhm.
father should be able to care for their children, and that it is entirely reasonable for a woman to say, "I would like 2 hours to go hang out with some women that will pour into my life." Absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't go purse shopping. Like maybe you can connect and have a real conversation. I'm not one percent woman here. But like whatever it is you need to do to really connect, have real meaningful conversation, my invitation to husbands is that pays out more in your life than you can possibly imagine every time. And the truth is, this is just the nature of humans. We tend to over exaggerate the pain of the moment and tend to under exaggerate the pain of the future. And if we can make the sacrifice now of a dad or a mom saying, "I will watch these kiddos, even though I'm 10th level stressed, whatever's happening, the dog just ate the diaper and I don't know where the poop went. Still, go ahead, honey. This is your time. Go and do it." But then to honor that time. So if I'm going with Bob, like maybe I say, "Hey, did you see this horse thing for 5 minutes?" But then to spend the real time, "Okay, Bob, here's what's really going on. This, and this. I'm not loving my wife, whatever."
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I had a good Christian woman speak into my life early in marriage was she said, "Honey, he can never be your girlfriend. He doesn't
Right.
have the capacity to hold the bucket for all those things you want to talk about as a girlfriend. So maintain those girlfriends, maintain those supportive relationships." And it sounds like you're saying he needs to maintain those on the other side too, of where he can stand, so men would rather stand shoulder to shoulder and talk facing this way, whereas women will turn and will face each other. I watched it in the grocery store, this two sets of couples. The men are standing shoulder to shoulder and the women are standing face to face. Obviously they've known each other for a long time. They're having some great conversation. They're in the store, all those types of things. But it was just, I wish I'd taken a picture, Clintus, and picture. It was just really apparent that I can't fill the male role that he needs, especially, you talked about this when you came on, especially with if their father has died young, if they've had a really
Right.
difficult father relationship, if, as my father grew up, he grew up with a very angry God, so connecting with other
Right.
men was kind of a real authoritative power struggle piece. I I can love him a lot, but I can't fix that for him. He's got to fix his own male relationships. So what do you see when the wife gets in and she tries to do all the fixing? What are the results of that?
So have you ever seen a dance where two people try to lead?
I've been that
It,
person.
yeah, right. I think most ladies have it sometime. It doesn't work well. But now let's make it worse. Let's pretend the wrong person tries to lead and the first person just sits down in the middle of the dance floor. It
Yes.
doesn't work well, right? And so like this is just my invitation to the ladies is I get it. I get the frustration. I understand the desire to make things better, to heal, to nurture, to tend. But the reality is you can only fix a certain problem with the right tool to fix it. And your job as a wife is not to be that tool in the same way that a husband's job in the marriage is not to be that girlfriend. He can't be.
Mhm.
I've watched this really closely, and a common mistake men make is they go into fix it mode when a wife wants to communicate a problem. And so I love to watch people and study people, and I've watched women talk. And my theory is something like that women will oscillate between fix it mode and feeling mode so fast that men can't even track and keep up with what's happening. And the nature of the conversation with women just changes so quick, but they all are on the same page. They all get it. They all nod. They all understand. And as a man, like I just imagine sometimes if I was in that situation, I'd be like, what? No, I don't understand. Because I don't have a female brain. I can't speak the same language they do, right? And the reverse is equally as true. A woman doesn't have a male brain. She cannot show up and fill that role. Here's the reality. When I go to Jared and I say, Jared, I'm screwing up and I need help, I actually take the role of the feminine in that conversation, and he becomes the order. All right. And he becomes the order
Mm.
because I'm loose, I'm chaos. I'm in chaos in that moment. And I'm unstructured. I'm falling apart. And he becomes the order as a proxy for Christ that then pours order into my life. If
Mhm.
you as a woman were even able to become the order, just think what that means for the rest of your dance. Because if you're the order and he's the chaos, there's no attraction left, there's no romantic connection left. Like it's so destructive to so many other areas of the marriage.
And that you've described what often happens in addiction is
Yes.
he is in the chaos. So she steps into the masculine, into the order, and she's taking care of the finances. She has the job. She has the kids to manage. There is no role left for him. She's basically cut him out and said, okay, I don't see any other way but to manage this myself, which is where you lose boundaries, where you lose scope. And like you said, not only does the partner sit down, they disappear from the dance. So I think
Yes.
you've just nailed it, that the feminine takes on the masculine and says, I will hold the family together. And then what I've also seen is the family becomes the idol.
Yes.
If I can make this work, then we must be okay. And what do you think God's doing when we do that? He's like, wow, that's a plan. That's not my plan, but that's a plan
Yeah.
there. So for women who have already moved into this because they're like, we're going to lose the house, we're going to,
Yep.
the kids are going to be, wild banshees. How do they slowly back out in a way that they can feel comfortable about?
So, a couple things. Number one, they may not feel comfortable. Like there's a discomfort in this process that seems to be unavoidable. I know of a couple families that have gone through this process, both directions. And I would say number one, number two technically, create some space. Like you should talk to your husband, be like, I want you to be the leader. I'm willing to create some space and intentionally choose an area to start creating, not every area at first. Like, he's got to figure this out too, but create a space. But then number three, give him permission to do it badly. The reality
Mm,
is you have a system you've been doing. It's been more or less working, whatever level you're at. When he steps in, it's probably going to be worse. And here's what I commonly see in this marital dance. And I work with men on this all the time. Let's say there's an area of struggle. Here's a common one. Maybe he's not pursuing her romantically enough and being, flirty enough outside of the bedroom. And so she says, I want you to flirt with me more during the day. Send me more texts, praise me more, say more positive things about me, kind of get my brain ready. And so he'll make a tentative effort. And to her perspective, it's so little. But his tentative effort would be like, hey, you look nice today, and your hair is pretty. And her brain will go something like, what? That's it? I asked you to come and do this thing, and that was your A game? And right? And then his perspective is, shoot, I tried, I got in trouble. Let's not do that again. And then all of a sudden, the two of them are at these crossroads. We says, well, I wanted you to do the thing. He said, but you beat me for doing the thing. It's like, and then you see how it spirals. So here's my invitation.
yes.
Know that his first steps into these domains are going to be poorly done. Not because he's a bad person, he's a sinner like all of us, but because he doesn't know how it is you're doing it. He will have a different system. His system, when refined, may work better, but at the first, it certainly will not work better than your current system is.
Mhm,
And to
mhm,
give space for that. And as hard as it is to applaud what looks like a tiny attempt, oftentimes when
mhm.
couples are in these situations, they have each of them in their own way dug the hole really deep. And each of them stands there and says, boy, I'd love it if we were standing not out in this hole. And they will each take like one little tiny step up, put a little bit of dirt back in the hole, and they're like, oh, this hole's still deep. I don't like being in holes. But the reality is the perspective is to say, but hey, we're slightly closer to the surface. It's not where I want to be. I don't want to stop here, but we can at least acknowledge that much.
Well, we've stopped digging. It's
That
an
alone is
AA
huge.
term of put the shovel down. If you want,
Yep.
if you want to get better and stand on the next level and the next level and the next level, you have to stop digging. Michael, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you. Is there one thing for a wife to do, simple thing she could do today that would be supportive without seeming either controlling or fake?
So this one may be a little controversial, but I'm going to throw it out there anyways. There is something that happens in a man's brain when a woman is powerfully present in physical intimacy with him. And there's something there that fuels him to believe more in himself, to be more willing to put on the sword and the armor and confront the dragon, and to be more willing to confront whatever it is that he's scared of his life when he feels like he's supported physically, and by that I mean sexually. And so I'm going to encourage you that if you are a married woman, to consider supporting your husband more in this way, not because he's earned it, because of course he hasn't, not because necessarily it's your greatest idea, but because it is something on a psychological level feeds men's ability to go out and conquer the world. There's something about being really, really well loved sexually by a woman that makes a man feel like, all right, I can go do this thing. And it's going to be a small effect, especially at first. Like if he's deep, deep, deep in a gutter, that's not going to pull him out the gutter in one move. But I will invite you that in the Bible, Paul says to give yourself completely to your spouse. And I think I've worked with so many men whose wives withhold this piece of the marriage. And they're like, well, you need to do better for this. Or if I ever hear of you clicking on the internet again, you're never getting this again. Like that is just so disruptive to the male healing cycle. And to invite women to consider prayerfully, not in a way that's abusive, not in a way that puts them in danger or anything like that, but in a way that it can be freely given, to give of that piece themselves more deeply to their husbands.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Where can we find you? Where is all your work?
So I'm an engineer, which means I'm very bad at naming things. And so I have simple names. And so I'm a life coach. I work with men and I'm a Catholic. So I put those together. I'm a CatholicLifeCoachForMen.com. My podcast is Catholic Life Coach for Men. So by all means, just put those together. You'll find me. I work with Christians. I believe so strong in the faith that I happily accept both Protestant and Catholic clients, but I tend not to work with people who don't have Christ as the center of their life.
I understand. Thank you again. Really appreciate you being here. And we will look forward to another episode together because I know you have so much more to share.
Thank you so much, Ali. This has been a delight.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope, or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.